Hello, I'm Holly, a governance specialist at Source Code Control, and today I'm going to take you through the process of becoming OpenChain ISO 5230 conformant. At Source Code Control, we are conformant to the ISO standard. This video will take you through the process we took on our journey to conformance and the process we use for our clients. Firstly, I will discuss the ISO standard and its contents, and then move on to the tool we use to help map out and manage your conformance process. Finally, I will take you through some examples to demonstrate what the OpenChain ISO 5230 conformance journey looks like in practice. So firstly, a bit about the standard. In December 2020, the OpenChain project was ratified and published as an international standard titled ISO IEC 5230-2020. Therefore, ISO 5230 and the OpenChain specification are functionally identical. The core of the OpenChain project is its specification. This defines the key requirements of a quality open source license compliance program that builds trust between organizations. The specification addresses the question, how do I trust open source compliance in my supply chain? Well, trust in the supply chain can be founded on the fact that an organization's conformant program indicates to others that it has been designed to achieve license compliance for the open source software it shares. The standard contains 5 key areas for conformance. Firstly, the program foundation. This is all about your open source software policy. At Source Code Control, we have created a tool which allows you to document your policy, and we have various policy templates to get you started. It is essential for you to train the relevant staff members on your policy, as if they are unaware of its existence or don't understand its contents, then its existence becomes futile. It is also likely there will be differing knowledge about open source software across the various job roles in your organisation. Therefore, training should also be given to help your employees with their understanding. In turn, this will help your implementation of the policy. At Source Code Control, we offer a training course on open source based on the OpenChain ISO 5230 curriculum. To find out more, please visit our website sourcecodecontrol.co. When we went through the conformance process, we created an internal SharePoint to act as a wiki containing all information regarding open source and its use within our organisation. Creating a central wiki is a great way to increase the transparency regarding your use of open source software within the organisation. Secondly, the relevant tasks must be defined and supported. This section is all about delegating responsibility for open source license compliance. An essential part of this requirement is to assign an open source review board. The Open Source Review Board define a framework and process for using open source software in an organisation's development and when contributing code to the community. They deal with all internal and external inquiries regarding open source software. As some organisations may not have the resources to do this, it is also possible for this role to be outsourced. Source Code Control can act as this role as a managed service. Next, there must be a process for open source content review and approval. This is an essential step to ensure that open source license compliance is achieved. Then, a process for compliance artifact creation and delivery. This ensures that reasonable commercial efforts have been instituted on the preparation of compliance artifacts such as the creation of software bill of materials, written offers for source code, copyright, attribution and license notices, as required by the identified licenses in the supplied software. Next, understanding open source community engagements. This section may not be applicable to your organisation if, as an organisation, you do not license your projects under open source licenses. However, guidelines should still be put in place around whether you allow your developers to contribute to external open source projects and under what terms. The final section is titled Adherence to the Specification Requirements, which states in order to conform for this section, a document must be drafted that affirms your program satisfies all the requirements of OpenChain ISO 5230. In order for a program to be deemed OpenChain ISO 5230 conformant, all requirements in the standard must be satisfied. At the start of your journey, before we start to implement the ISO standard into your processes, we'll ask you to complete our OpenChain self-assessment questionnaire. This questionnaire assesses the existing processes within your organisation and how they align with the ISO 5230 standard. The questionnaire has 5 sections. Each section covers a section of the ISO standard. It doesn't take long. However, once completing one section, you can continue at any time, as a URL link to complete the rest of the questionnaire will be sent to your email. A copy of your answers and scores will also be sent to your email for your reference. To ease the adoption process, at Source Code Control we use a tool called Trello. Trello is a portal tool which makes management processes easier and organised. At the start of a conformance project, your Trello portal may look something like this. Each requirement of the standard has its own board where tasks can be assigned and performance can be tracked. We will walk you through all the requirements of the specification, and then using Trello, you can assign tasks to individuals within your organisation to start documenting your processes and gradually fill out the board with information regarding your organisation's use of open source software. Once you have completed our OpenChain self-assessment questionnaire, the next step to map out on the Trello board is how far your organisation is already complying with the standard. The scores you receive from the questionnaire can be put onto the board, and the tool's label function allows you to clearly present this and track the maturity of your conformance process for each requirement. Tasks can then be assigned and progress through to conformance can be tracked. The tool also allows you to make a checklist for each requirement and set deadlines. For each task, teams and sub-teams can be created. You can do this by adding members to each board, as you can see on the screen here, and you can assign specific tasks to each member. You can also create a checklist and add deadlines to track the performance of the teams and the conformance process. Once all the tasks have been fulfilled on a card, it should look something like this. The conformance task here is to produce a documented policy governing open source license compliance of the supplied software. Once you have fulfilled the task, you change the label from red to green to indicate your conformance. There is space to write a description or any extra detail you feel is relevant. For example, you may want to include here where the policy can be found and which members of staff it applies to. At this point, everything on your checklist should be ticked off. And the most important thing here is your proof of conformance. As you can see on the slide, you can attach documents to each individual card. By attaching your proof of conformance for each requirement, you are also creating a centralised portal where employees may find all the information they need regarding the use of open source software within your organisation. Now we will go through a couple of examples to demonstrate the conformance process using Trello. This is typically the starting point for a conformance project. As you can see, the entire board is red. The first step, as previously mentioned, is to determine how your existing processes align with those of OpenChain ISO 5230 standard. Our OpenChain self-assessment questionnaire will provide the answers for this step, and then the labels can be changed as appropriate. If you are already conformant, the requirement will be labelled green. If you are partially conformant, orange, or if non-conformant, red. It may be the case that your board remains red like this, or if you've already been thinking about your use of open source, it may be that labelling varies across your board, like this. The second step is to assign all the tasks on each card for completion. Once each task has been assigned, you can change the label accordingly. At this point, your board may look something like this. When work starts on a particular card, the yellow in progress label can be added. The idea is that your board will gradually move from red to green as you start to fulfill the conformance tasks and build out your Trello board. Our first example is the first requirement of the standard. This is that a written open source software policy for your organisation should exist. Our Trello board template contains the following checklist to guide you through this card. Firstly, the open source review board should have a discussion about policy terms. Then the open source review board lead creates a draft policy, and the last step is that a draft policy is agreed. This is only our guidance on how to tackle this requirement, therefore changes can be made to the checklist as you see fit, and extra tasks may be added. As you complete each task, the checklist can be ticked off, and when your draft policy is confirmed, you can then change your label to fully conformant. A completed board will look something like this. Once a draft is completed, this should be attached to prove conformance. As mentioned previously, other sections of the standard will likely dictate the contents of your policy. This is why the final task on the checklist is to agree on a draft policy. Open source software policies are dynamic in nature and will likely change as your organisation grows and your use of open source software and participation in the community changes. Here you can see the start of the process as the board starts to turn green towards conformance. However, it is important to remember again, this example assumes there are no open source software management processes in place. It may be possible that your board at this stage is full of different coloured labels and information, as you may have processes in place, various tasks may be assigned, and progress towards completion may be underway. Here we are jumping to section 3 of the standard. This requirement is all about having a documented procedure for identifying and tracking, archiving information about all third-party open source components within your supplied software. Here you must map out the guidelines for your developers as to when they should create software bill of materials, how often, and what they are to do with those once created. Once completing this board, it will look something like this. As you can see here, we've attached an image of our processes and attached the Excel spreadsheet containing a software bill of materials to demonstrate proof of conformance. Here we've skipped to the end of the conformance journey. Your Trello portal will look something like this. Every card will be labelled as green as fully conformant. This process is not onerous. Our Trello board templates guide you through conformance, and we will also provide our support and expertise throughout the entire process. Trello is a great way to clearly demonstrate your conformance to the OpenChain ISO 50230 standard, but also this board acts as a centralised point containing all the information your employees need to know regarding their use of open source software. To find out more information about how your organisation can become OpenChain ISO 50230 conformant, visit our website or contact us at open@sourcecodecontrol.co. Thank you very much for watching.